Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting panel with the CPaaS Acceleration Alliance. We've got great cast of characters here today, and we are talking about really upping your game with unified communications and contact center and bringing CPaaS into the mix and how companies can leverage that to create better customer experiences, better employee experiences. So before we get into the meat of the discussion, I'd like to do a quick round the table, talk about who our participants are today, and get to know them and their companies. So why don't we start? David, you are in the right next to me in the window. So why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Robert. David White, I'm the Director of North America for CM.com. I'm charged with scaling our North American operations and the business overall. CM.com is a global provider of business messaging capabilities, both via API as well as on the SaaS side for a more turnkey solution for our clients.
Great. Thanks, David. Michael, how about you?
Yes, hi. Thanks. Mike Brandenburg, Senior Industry Analyst here at Frost Sullivan. I'm part of the Connected Work team, which is our kind of merging of the entire kind of enterprise communication stack. So we cover everything from headsets to UC to advanced capabilities like CPaaS. I lead our global research effort for the CPaaS market and have been following the space for 6 or 7 years now.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Marco, how about you?
Thanks, Robert. Marco Escobar, I'm with IntelePeer. We're a North American provider specifically around the CPaaS. We like to call it communications automations platforming, but really the critical component where we focus is helping organizations that have low development capacity, whether that's internal or external, to make the capacity of making those integrations happen easily, whether through API or through a SaaS platform as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Marco. And Vovo, last but not least.
Hi, Robert, folks. Good to be here. I'm Vova Gernishi, Enterprise Product Director for GMS, Global Message Services, which is a CPaaS and messaging protection and monetization provider for operators. So on the CPaaS side, we're collaborating with enterprises, but at the same time, we're helping operators secure their SMS networks. And I can't wait to share a bit more with regards to what exactly we're doing, both on the customer experience as well as on a programmable APIs and comms. Good to be here.
Awesome. Great to have you. All right. We got a good representation from the market here today. So Mike, why don't you get us started? And let's talk about what we're seeing in the market today.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things we do here at Frost Sullivan is kind of talk to IT decision makers, through surveys, through interviews, and we published a study in April, kind of based on those findings with the CPaaS. We asked a ton of CPaaS questions as part of that. So really, what Robert has up here for me is the adoption curve, and this was kind of the first interesting question that I wanted to see is really where we are for adoption today, and where does future demand push. As you can imagine, the kind of the core CPaaS capabilities, messaging, email, increasingly video and voice, kind of topped today's chart in terms of, already adopted and in place in some use cases. What I kind of found more interesting is we also asked, if this is in place today, do you have plans to adopt by 2025? And kind of that these numbers here on the right-hand side are probably the most interesting is if you look at kind of leaders and laggards in terms of modalities, while messaging is kind of high today, it's kind of ending up at like 80%, where kind of at the bottom, chatbots, AI is low today. It's bridging that gap. So, we're seeing kind of in terms of interest, 70s and 80s in terms of, by the time we get to 2025 adoption. And that's, this answers the question, is it just SMS? Is it just, kind of point solutions here and there? And kind of our IT decision makers that we're talking to are saying, no, it's kind of, we're all in on APIs and programmability.
And this is awesome, right? Because we've heard when we talk about CPaaS over the last how many years, we've always talked about messaging. And I remember Marco, especially some of the conversations we've had at IntelePeer. Oh my gosh, voice is dead, and messaging is the way of the future. But it's really awesome to see here that voice is on top of mind, along with chatbots and everything. So I'm excited to hear as we go through today's session. What are the cool things we're doing with the voice, and how are we changing the game there? And I know there's some really cool stuff coming on that.
So the other kind of big question that was kind of a, there's been a lot of talk about the COVID bounce. Was CPaaS just a tactical response to, kind of solve those little quick problems, or is this really a strategic part of, the enterprises? Is this, is CPaaS going to stick around, once retailers are able to switch back from curbside pickup to, in-store purchases and things like that? So if you jump to the next one that I shared, this is where it got, extra interesting to me is, out of those that had already adopted, we kind of asked a follow-up question of, do you see those investments staying the same, increasing, decreasing? And there's little to no decrease. So, I think this train's rolling. There's a lot of either staying the same, we're going to, kind of consuming at the same levels, but, just likely, there's actually a big push to increase investments in these channels. So it's certainly, CPaaS is not something that's going away because, the use cases are less needed, if that makes sense. This has really become a core part of, an enterprise's digital transformation, and it's a go forward.
Yeah.
Michael, are you able to expand a bit more on the provisioning management APIs? What exactly was meant by this line?
We kind of would, like I said, we went through kind of give some common use cases. So, kind of whether it's like following the sun, SIP trunking provisioning, or just kind of automation, to the carrier providers is really focused there, of just managing the back end is where we kind of define the manage and provision aspects of that.
Yeah, this is a big area that we see as we're talking with telecom operators in particular in the industry, right? We've got a lot of investment in Project Kamara, Open Gateway Initiative, and those things.
Right.
So we're excited to see
where
that goes. Yeah.
So I used to see this labeled as typically network APIs, just coming from the operators world. This is how they treat it, right? Opening their networks and data points to consumption by enterprises. Got it. Thanks a lot.
Michael, real quick, are you seeing particular verticals or industries that are doing a better job of adopting or investing in CPaaS right now?
That is an interesting one too, because we did kind of break our respondents into verticals, and it's really busy slide, so we didn't share it here. But the general trend is it kind of follows the global is if they were light today, the plans to go forward were kind of catching up and bridging the gaps, and it's very for those interested, the full report's available and published. But where it got interesting to me was verticals separated by channel. So education, for example, was a lot further along with video compared to public sector, which was much more messaging and API focused. And retail, manufacturing were kind of well established in the customer facing channels, messaging, email, and we're kind of lagging behind on video and chatbots and things like that, but we're bridging that gap. So that bridging the gap across channels, remains, but everyone's kind of starting at a varied place today.
Okay, cool. And that I think that gives us a lot of meat here to talk about in this first section. So let's start, David, with you, because I know you guys are doing a lot of really cool stuff with messaging and doing some other stuff in verticals. What are you guys seeing in the market?
Yeah, going back to what Michael just previously said, I think there's certainly a disconnect between perception and reality, at least from a brand standpoint. And you could take this across any vertical, but in 2020 we saw a shift in consumer buying power, right, away from Gen X and the baby boomers, and that consumer buying power. And you look at our workforce, the trends correlate, has shifted to Gen Z and Gen Y. And if you poll, these generations of consumers, 66% of them, expect their favorite brands to kind of know who they are. 59%, that's over half, would rather do business with a chatbot. So if you take a look at what the data is telling us, brands really need to adapt to this kind of new method of interacting with their consumers and leveraging these technologies in business messaging channels, APIs through their favorite brands, and certainly AI to understand who they are. Some of the applications that we're seeing, specifically in the retail and the e-commerce side, AI is being driven to analyze data. So there are many CRMs out there, CDPs out there to collect all of this data that you're receiving from your buyer, whether or not their preferences, their payment preference, whether it be via Apple Pay or by credit card or some other method of payment, what size clothing they wear, what particular type of clothing, what fabrics they tend to buy, what colors they tend to buy. So all of this data is being collected, and we're leveraging AI internally to make these recommendations to brands, because this is either a human capital type of investment in understanding these analytics, or you could leverage AI to do so to make these kinds of suggestions. So from a marketing perspective and from a retargeting and a smarter marketing perspective, our brands and some of our most exciting use cases are utilizing AI within our SaaS platform and our marketing side to strengthen this relationship between the brand and their end user consumer.
That's awesome. And I love the different perspectives here that we've got today. So I'm gonna, Marco, I'm gonna ask you, IntelePeer's got a different spin on the whole communications platform and programmable communications with communications automation platform. So let's talk about that real quickly. And as we talk about leveraging that platform and customer interactions, what are the cool things you guys are seeing out there in the market?
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on a couple of things, because you talked about some past belief system that there's voice is dead. And I think the way that we were doing voice should be dead, because a lot of what we were doing in the past life, if you will, past couple of years, was really not the best for the consumer. And so some of the trends that we're doing and we're seeing with our customers that are transitioning is maintaining that voice stream, maintaining that tool set, but really enabling it to make it a good experience for the customer. We have a customer right now that we're enabling a generative AI via voice so that they can have, meaning the consumer can have a real interaction with the bot, but that they can actually bring them into their gym. And so using that same tool set, that same technology that we're all talking about, I mean, the whole world is talking about ChatGPT. It's one of the fastest buzzwords that I think has ever grown. But using that kind of technology and then voice enabling it to make the experience better for the consumer is really the critical difference that I think is making big headway for us. And the reason is that consumers, the reason they were walking away from voice for a while was because the experience was poor, right? The reason chatbots was so successful was because it was an instantaneous interaction. Even if it wasn't with a human yet, it was instantaneous. Now what we can do is we can do the same thing for voice and instantaneously interact with them where it's a good experience rather than that very contained conversational AI experience that's been around for, what, 15 years now. And so what we're doing with them is a little bit different. We're not having the client necessarily call in, but we're using the chatbot to create a virtual sales agent and really explain to them, answer their questions, what the gym has to offer for them to enable that customer to come into their location and then interact with the human being. And so the cool thing about it is that putting up those right guardrails into that generative experience, making certain that we're answering the questions that they have while leading them towards this inevitable event of come into the closest location that is available to you, is really what this customer is doing. We're doing it with another customer that's in the payment processing space, where before they were able to do some very basic interactions, confirm that your card is in your hand, confirm who you are. Now we're able to take it to that next level with that generative and answer some of those basic questions, but then also some of those, I would even argue, tier 2 questions that they might have about their account and about their experience. So I think the multimodal argument that we're talking about right now is really being driven by the fact that we have 5 different generations that have buying power. And the company is short-sighted if they're only focusing on one, absolutely. But if they're only assuming that the other has all the buying power. So I think as we continue to progress, we're going to continue to have additional generations that want to communicate in different formats and different ways. And we have to keep up with that. Companies like CM and IntelePeer, inevitably, I think we have to continue to offer tool sets that they want so that they can make it multimodal instead of focusing in on only the one that maybe they're focused in on today because that's their customer base, without looking forward or back to the other generations that they impact.
I build on one thing with Marco said last. It's not only generational, but I think it's also regional. And we saw some of those, that video is actually doing better in Latin America, for example, than North America. There's so many ways to hash it that I think you have to have a strategy across all of those channels. I absolutely agree with that.
That's a great way to put it, because we do tend to think about we've got to work on this particular modality or channel, and you forget the fact that as Marco said, you do have multiple generations that you as a company are servicing, right?
I'd say regional differences are a fairly exciting aspect to bring up, and I would just start from the very basics. I'm delighted to see that SMS and messaging APIs are going nowhere still, right? They are still going to grow at least a little bit. And from what we see in the market is the following. First of all, on the global scale, there's much more emphasis on predictability, reliability, and trust between operators and enterprises, because I'm talking about SMS primarily as one of the, despite all our efforts to work through rich media and OTT channels, SMS is dominating the interactions between enterprises and users, right, in many territories. And the market is fairly unpredictable. So what enterprises are looking for, constantly look for predictability. Can you ensure that my messages will be delivered with significant quality at the price point we've agreed 2 weeks ago, and not 10, 20, 50% higher than that initially committed? That is the challenge. And there must be a balance. There must be found a balance between willingness on the operator side to achieve their revenue targets and ambitions not to kill the channel at all, right? That's from the global standpoint. On the regional scale, what we see in Central Europe, for example, that because of the conflict and the war ongoing, there's slightly less promotional traffic overall, but there's much more transactional traffic traveling around through messages. And consequently, end users and obviously enterprises are much more demanding on throughput and time of delivery of these transactional messages, because people are dependent. So to me, what I see, if I try to look at it zooming out a bit, it looks like in the times of crisis, basic needs are still the most important. Nobody cares about Black Friday deals whatsoever, but everyone wants to be sure that their salary has been added to their account and they want to get this notification now. And they don't care what channel it will go through. The need is to get that message in. And furthermore, on top, I'm going to share a few more things later on about the how CDP could be further enhanced with behavioral analysis. But for now, that's it. To me, regional differences, regional peculiarities with regards to the consumption of different channels, different APIs are critical, and you can't have one-fit-all solutions.
Great,
You know,
thanks.
can I ask a question? I find it interesting that oddly enough that he had a phone call coming in at the moment that we're talking about because somebody wants to talk to him on the voice. But I think one of the things that I'm experiencing, and this is strictly me as an individual, as a consumer, is really a frustration over SMS fatigue. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean there are so many companies jumping and throwing lots of SMSs at me that it's becoming a little overwhelming. And so having a client that understands that there's a good balance between everything is going to be critical. But the second question, and kind of carving into that, is, I mean, email was great. It was a wonderful tool set, but how many of us have turned off notifications on emails? And what I don't want to see is our industry push SMS in that same place, where we're pushing so much communication that it almost becomes white noise worthy, and that people start turning off that notification and saying, I'll check it tonight, rather than that 98% receive and read rate in 3 minutes that we've seen traditionally. So do you guys all agree that there has to be a good consumer balance when we're hitting them, not just us as a company saying we want more communication?
I can tell you, and you bring a great point, Marco. You know, when we're in our discovery process with a client, with a brand, that's a conversation that's, you know, I basically mandate that our sales team have with the client, with the brand, with the consultant, because to your point, I mean, I've created new email addresses just because of the you know, I'm inundated with you know, with promotions and sales and you name it. And yeah, I'm getting the same kinds of short code blasts from, you know, big retail brands, and I click a link, and you know, it's a sale for women's tennis shirts and youth baseball bats, and it's a spray and pray kind of approach, and it's old school, it's antiquated, it's not good enough anymore. Especially with the, you know, with the up and coming consumer, who again expects you to know who they are and what their preferences are and what their purchasing history looks like. So you know, we're really trying to help companies, you know, to show them there's a better mousetrap, if you will. And you know, if you look at specific industries such as charities and not-for-profits, I mean, you think about that. If you hit the same family up, I don't care if they're your biggest or your smallest giver, you inundate them with messages asking for money, asking for money, asking for money, with no kind of strategic plan, timed approach, that sort of thing. You could do more damage to your brand than the benefits that you originally intended to achieve in the first place. So yeah, we're certainly seeing that trend. We're really, as much as we love SMS, it's very much a North American thing, Central European thing, if you will. We're really trying to steer our clients towards secure messaging channels, the other social messaging channels via Meta, Google, and WhatsApp, because they do help enable a brand to provide, you know, when coupled with a CDP platform and some of these AI generative you know, characteristics and recommendations. You know, if you receive these kinds of messages with carousel images that are really focused to you, that have your name, your size, your favorite colors, you know, some snapshots of what you've previously purchased, you're more likely to open that message. You're more likely to interact with that message, and hopefully the goal is to transact, you know, within that message. So the spray and pray approach, we really frown upon. We think it's dying and it should be dead. But that really, you know, I think it comes from leaders such as us on this call to kind of steer the market and continually educate the marketplace as far as that goes.
And Marco, I like your point about white noise, right? And it's not just marketers and everybody else sending out messages, but I looked at my email this morning. I was notified that my Amazon account had been shut down by some scam, not actually shut down, but how many spam mails and everybody's trying to hack into our accounts and everything, and you're trying as a marketer to get your message in with all these other things, and it's a really big nightmare. So on that front, we're talking about CDPs, we're talking about multiple channels. Can you guys point out a customer on your side that's like, wow, they're really getting it right, and they're doing some really cool stuff?
I'm happy to bring up an example straight away, and it follows up what David was talking about with regards to personalization and segmentation. That absolutely 100%. That's the key to all the sales, marketing, upsell, cross-sell efforts, right? You must use rich media channels. You must interact. You must be very tailored and precise. And the funny story is as follows. So we've got a major broadband provider, right? We're operating with and across multiple countries, and their biggest pain apparently is not selling new subscriptions, but chasing people to pay for what they have purchased. So it's not prepaid, it's postpaid, right? And often humans are humans. They tend to forget, they are lazy, they have some other duties to do. They just, sit on a chair and don't want to go to bank to pay whatsoever. So they were looking for a solution, how they could potentially decrease the amount of missed payments overall. And what we've been working with them on together is obviously employing data to segment out different users with different behaviors, but not to just give characteristics, but to, based on how they behave, based on who they are as people, what should be the tone of voice of the message, how they should be addressed, what could be the exact words that could trigger and prompt the right reaction on their side. So with you, Robert, for example, it's fairly easy, casual, informal English, right? But then if we were to send a message to Marco should receive like a strict, almost like government type message. You must pay dear citizen on date X, otherwise something horrible will happen. And introducing that approach, you would wonder how a simple tweak in tone of voice, in the context, is making huge changes to conversion rates into completed payments. This is a real case example how we're not talking about AI in general, some future-proof ideas, futuristic concepts. It's very practical use case. Make sure my customers pay on time. How? Just talk to them in the right tone of voice because they will understand it. Here we go.
Yeah, that's great.
And I find that interesting, Ova, because the personalization is being missed by a lot of customers. They think that categorization is enough. But the example that is always in the back of my head is that there's two gentlemen in Great Britain. They're both male. They were both born in 1948. They were both raised there in the UK. They were both married twice. They both live in castles. They're both extremely wealthy, but one's a king and one's Ozzy Osbourne, right? And generalizing and categorizing is problematic, but being specific and personalizing is going to be critical. And that is the cool thing that AI is doing for our industry, is that using it in the back end is helping ensure that that personalization happens instead of stereotyping and categorizing at a general level.
Spot on, Mark.
Great. No, that's great. So these things sound very difficult to implement. All right, you're talking about leveraging AI and tying all these things together. Is it really that difficult to implement? And how are you guys supporting your customers in getting these things up and running? Is it possible to get something up and running in 15, 30 days, or are we talking about year-long projects for these things?
We certainly focused on the crawl, walk, run method, right? We want to make sure that customers experience some kind of improvement, especially on those key things that they had in their project plan. But much like David's team, we go in as a consultation approach and say, what is it that you want to be tomorrow? But then also, what is it that you want to be in a year and a half from now? Because that growth rate is obviously very advantageous for our business, but equally as important, you can't throw the kitchen sink at customers. They need to experience that slow, meticulous adjustment to being a multimodal and being AI driven and being capable of doing these new, maybe not new, but new for them ways of experiencing the CPaaS world. And so we certainly want to make sure that we're getting them comfortable. And those basic projects, some of those basic things absolutely can be executed in 30 days. But I think much like CM, we really focus on the consultation because we want to ensure that they have that good experience. And then because we're not only developer led, we can have some of those executions because of our easy to use and deploy tool set. We can have executions happen as little as really a couple of weeks, with some of the more integrated and deeper interactions happening in a good timeline, but in a good timeline that's baked out with the customer so that they can have a good experience as they move their business into this next generation of interactivity with their customer.
Wow.
Yeah, certainly agree with Marco. We take a calculated risk when interacting with a brand, and we say, hey, look, let's, you don't have to bite off the whole thing and forklift what you're doing or really break your workflows or your business processes. What if we just took a small component of your business, like your rewards program or your VIP segment of the business, if you understand who that is, and let's see what happens. Let's see what happens if we come up with a cool opt-in, and we really make a concerted effort to meet your clients in the channels of their preference. Would they like to be communicated via voice? Would they like to be communicated via SMS, or would they prefer WhatsApp? So by working with the client to okay, let's to your point, Marco, it's the crawl space. We're banking on the fact that we're going to be able to go back 45 days later, analyze the data, let the data speak to us as the supplier as well as our client, and say, okay, are we seeing improvements? What is the CX experience been? What kind of feedback are we getting? Have your net promoter scores increased? That sort of thing. And I got to say, 8.5 out of 10 times, they're really, really excited. And subsequent calls follow through with other departmental leaders as to how our platform could potentially expand into helping their particular department grow. So we're in the process right now with the manufacturer who took this kind of step with us about a year ago, and fast forward to today, they're a global brand. Constantly expanding into new countries, and every country has its preferred kind of messaging channel, if you will, which is great for us because it kind of forces that development to integrate and build new APIs and build new integrations. But what we've found with this particular client was they had a major security issue, a major compliance issue. So their GDPR compliance was really in jeopardy. Once we dug down to the workflow level, we found that a lot of their sales reps that were interfacing with restaurants and grocery stores to develop relationships with their client were using personal accounts, whether it be personal cell phone accounts for SMS communication or personal WhatsApp accounts for that type of communication, depending on the country. And as we dug in further, we're talking about 7, 8, 9 different messaging channels. So what happens when that sales rep decides that they want to go work for the competitor? All that intellectual property is gone. All of that risk, all of that potential business goes out the door along with that sales rep. Not to mention the fact that you really have no idea as a company and as a brand what's being communicated, what's being said, what expectations are being set with the client. And so one of the things our SaaS product was able to do was essentially centralize and bring all of that communication in, so that intellectual property stays within the company, stays within the brand. And at the same time, a byproduct is, we're increasing the customer experience. So the client loves it. The sales reps are like, oh, cool. I can separate my personal life from my business life by leveraging this. So we're seeing very, very good results in helping, and this is an American brand. This is an American brand that's simply looking to scale globally. And given the fact that we're in a global, economy, brands, no matter where they're headquartered in the world, are looking for these same kinds of capabilities. And it's all driven by CPaaS, which is really, really exciting.
David, you bring up a good point that I think is important. In this brand, their employees, their salespeople were interacting with their customers in a way that they didn't want. But a lot of times the reason that that is the case is because the employee experience to use the current tool sets is broken, it's poor, it's not effective, it's unimpactful. And I think that that's another thing that our industry can really make a difference on, is crafting and creating an environment where the employee experience is made easier, not just because we love our employees, but also because it makes the process for them to stay within bounds better and more capable. And if we can do that for businesses alone, employee happiness is going to go up. They're going to stay around longer. They're going to make their customers happier. Tiffany Bova talks about it in her book, about creating a better employee experience leads to more customer improvement and more revenue for many companies. And I think that that's an important thing that we have to touch with our customers every time, is improving the employee experience so that they stay within bounds easily to better improve the customer experience.
Robert,
Experience. Yeah, carry on, Robert. Carry on. Sorry, I was going to jump in.
Yeah, Michael, what are you seeing?
Carry on.
One of the questions we've asked over the number of years that we've been doing the survey is the obstacles. Why is CPaaS not on your radar? And I did see a kind of market shift a couple of years ago. It was all about we didn't have the skill set internally to take on the solutions, or our existing infrastructure didn't support that, and it's actually been kind of turned on its head. The top this year, the top one was actually still kind of not understanding the technology benefits or what they were getting. So it's less about I don't know how to make this technology work, and I don't have the skills, I don't have the coders to do this. I think a lot of that goes to the low-code, no-code tools that every one of this, in the market has been moving towards, to kind of take the heavy lift of coding and the development cycles out of it, and moving into a drag and drop, let me build a decision tree type environment to consume these. And to your point to compliance, so the top two of the most recent ones, we still don't see the value of it, and security compliance concerns of adding CPaaS into the mix. So that goes exactly to your point. So it's less about the heavy lift and more about does this fit with our organization? Does this keep us in compliance? So I think Marco's response of we're going to make you more compliant than you were before is an interesting point.
I could talk for years about obstacles and hurdles, because we're operating in Central Europe, in CIS, in Middle East, in South Asia, so emerging and developing markets. And the observation we have made so far, are typically there must be one, ideally two components that kind of match for you to potentially deploy a sophisticated solution quicker. One, it's the maturity of the organization and sophistication on the tech side. So leaders should realize and understand what's the value of business comms overall, right? And how it could enhance their interaction, customer experience, and employee experience as well, obviously. And another thing is how much it hurts them not to do it. Mm-hmm. So the broadband provider was really suffering. They were paying every single week with lost revenues for not deploying the right personalization solution. And the maturity wasn't there, but they didn't care actually, right? They were ready to expedite data aggregation and then quality control whatsoever, just to get the business problem solved. So what we see in these countries, in the markets I was talking about, fintechs and all the digital disruptors are obviously the first ones to pick up any new conversational experience, any customer experience solutions overall, to increase the efficiency of interaction with the end users. But on the other hand side, we see how established and mature businesses are just trying to solve their problems and pains. They are losing revenues to hungrier folks. They can't compete, and they can't deploy at the same pace that the market can, that their smaller companies can in their market. And this is exactly when they talk to folks like Marco, myself, David, to complement them with skill set, expertise, capabilities, and technology that is actually absent on their side. And let's face it, a bank is supposed to do banking. It's not their core expertise to build smart, AI-powered omnichannel conversations. And consequently, as any business, you probably would like to outsource everything that is not your core business to people who do it best. And just to finish off, drag and drop interfaces, visual builders are great, but you can't bypass low-code environments as well, for a very simple reason. Once they start building simple, straightforward customer journeys, they come back for more. And you can't deliver those without having at least a little bit of coding environment that you can jump in with Python or R or something, just craft the right experience you'd like to.
Great points. Yeah, that's can't say enough about really the no code interfaces have always been about getting in, doing things quickly, and then if you're doing it right, Vova, to your point, you're always going to want to come back for more, and that's always going to mean some level of low code and some level of code and integrating with the rest of your systems, right? So really good points. So let's wrap this baby up, and let's talk about real quick, what are the things you guys are most excited about as we're looking 6 months out, year out, 2 years out? Industry's been moving fast, but I know everybody here has got some really cool things coming up. So Marco, let's start with you and just go around the screen.
Well, I think that what I'm most excited about as an industry is I think we're at that inflection point where people get it enough. They're still a little bit hazy on how they can execute it themselves, but it has kind of turned that corner. I think if you were to ask me a year ago, I think the school was still there, but we're getting customers at a much faster clip to understand what we as an industry can do for them, albeit they're not 100% sure how they're going to execute it. But that's obviously where consultants like ours come in and really play up the advantages. But I think that the cool thing for me is they're starting to get it. I think what I'm really intrigued about the next 6 months is what happens to the evolving contact center because of our industry. Because I think you're going to see a lot of the self-service, especially with tools like generative AI that we can integrate into voice, really transition and help the waning contact center agent problem that we're having, where it's this low-skilled worker that frankly sometimes has a bad day, just broke up with their significant other or whatever, and so the interaction's not consistent. Now we can really make those interactions consistent when it's with a computer, with a great customized voice, and still leverage the good humans that are still in that contact center seat, and still help those customers more effectively by taking away some of that low effort, low energy interaction while reserving humans for that high value touch that they need to be focused on. So that's really where I think the industry is going. I'm really interested to see if it happens in the next 6 months or if it takes a little bit longer. But I think companies like ours are going to lead that way because, well, contact centers still want to sell you seats, and I think that that's going away from their core competency. And so I'd love to see what happens in the next 6 months versus maybe 18 months, but that's where I'm focused on.
Great points. David, how about you?
Yeah, I certainly agree with everything Marco just stated. I got into this industry from telecom after spending 25 years in telecom because of the opportunity, because of the ceiling that exists within this space. And let's face it, I mean, up until very recently, we didn't really have a space to call our own. And I look at the deals that are in our funnel, and almost every single deal that's stalled. When we really kind of peel back the onion, it's a budgetary reason, right? And it really boils down to, this is in a lot of times in a lot of deals, this is a fairly new concept for a brand, right? So they had their traditional call center focused on voice. They had their traditional operations, and this is kind of breaking workflows and creating new workflows. And if we're not repurposing human capital within the contact center and able to justify, like you're going to take 20% of your budget that used to go to your current CCaaS provider, and now you're going to funnel it over and move it over to us to enable these kinds of interactions with your clients. We're some of the reps and some of the deals are stalled because of that, and some of them, we simply have to wait till budgets get refreshed. But I'm really bold on where this industry is going to take us. I'm really bold. If you real life example, a Friday, and this is not my client, I wish it was, but we ordered a pizza with a voice bot, and it was a fantastic experience. The voice bot was clear, concise, replayed our order. I voiced my credit card information, asked me if I wanted to save it for future purposes. Now, anytime I call in from my cell phone number, it's like, would you like to simply repeat your order from last Friday? Yes, I would. It doesn't get any easier than that. What a great experience with a particular brand that I love, right? So I think we're going to see more and more of those kinds of transactions, and I think that's only going to increase over time.
That's awesome. Vova, how about you?
Well, fully aligned with the folks. I think, well, I know for sure what we're going to be focused on is Uber personalization. So what David was just talking about, it felt nice, right? Talking to it, but it felt like, yeah, it understands you, it's able to serve what you need. We'd like to take it even one step beyond so that it feels like, hey, whatever this business, like you've got your local grocer or your local butcher, we'd like to replicate the same feel and experience of interaction with someone you've been known for ages with much bigger, much larger organizations. So Uber personalization for sure, using any single data point and then using synthetic data if possible, or anything else that helps us build more meaningful interactions between the users and the businesses. And if we try to look a bit beyond just 6 months horizon, I'm still curious to see how the for now failed metaverse bet is going to play once 5G rolls out further and once VR and AR start taking over real world. That could be something completely different. I don't see it coming in the next 1-2 years, but definitely something to keep an eye on for a long-term shift in the way people communicate with business.
Sounds like a good topic for another panel. Mike, we've got three vendors here talking. What are you guys excited about from an analyst perspective?
I right now, and I think going forward, it's so refreshing to be following the space. I think I talked to many of you kind of pre-COVID, and all of my reports were, well, when a company starts a digital transformation project, communication is going to be an important element of that. And we remember how slow those digital transformation projects, and it obviously goes to, David's comment about budgets, but it was, old brands taking their time, meandering through their digital channels and processes and that. And I hate to say it this way, but, COVID jump-started that said, you can't wait to add those channels. You can't, you have to automate workflows. You can't do the business the way you were doing it before. So we're in a really new state, because so there was this kind of rapid tactical response, and we have to digital transform yesterday. It's going to be interesting for me to see how what the go forward is. Do we slow down? Do we, going back to those kind of original questions, is investment going to decrease? No, it's going to stay the same or grow going forward. So all the customers you're talking about, everyone gets it today. So that changes kind of all the market dynamics and how the go forward is. And I'm excited to see kind of new players bring some kind of fresh ideas into this. Sorry guys, you're going to get competition, and as well as where I think you're going to see kind of long established operators and things like that partner with folks like the three that are represented here to enable that directly for those customers, and stop trying to build it themselves and partner closely. So it's the market dynamics, I think, is changing, and that's really what I'm going to watch as well.
All right. Very cool. Yeah. Market's changing rapidly. I know a lot of the stuff we've talked about over the last 5 years is starting to come to fruition, and it's absolutely accelerating. And while we'll see some more competition, with the market growing to $100 billion in size by the end of this decade, I think we've all got enough space to carve out our piece and make a win for everybody. So great conversation today. Thank you, Vova with GMS, Marco with IntelePeer, David with CM, and Mike with Frost and Sullivan. Great to have you all on the show. And we'll talk to you all again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks all, everyone. Take care, folks.